rivals go head-to-head this weekend when the Pirates face the Cubs at Wrigley.
Swing and a miss. He struck him out.
The pregame at 3 Eastern, first pitch at 4. Saturday on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app. ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd podcast.
You ever heard of Maya Angelou? Look her up. It's called Google. Really smart. She said something once. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. You're dating somebody, thinking about getting married. No huge mistake, but little here, little there, little here, and you're like, wow, they lack integrity. They lie to their brother, and they lie to their boss. They wouldn't lie to me. If somebody treats the waitress poorly, and their sister poorly, and people beneath them poorly, that's who they are. Believe them. They're showing you. Jameis Winston showing crab legs right after he got drafted. It's not the end of the world. Doesn't mean he can't throw a spiral, but it's about the 37th example that he's really immature. Colin, it's no big deal. Really? Then why did he take it off his Instagram this morning? Because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers said, don't be an idiot. Don't extend the story. PR 101. You don't extend the story. You just gave everybody in this new social media world the picture if you bomb. And it's Tampa. Seen their offensive line, read about their history. It's 50-50, you may bomb. You just gave them the punchline to the joke. Again, it's not the end of the world. You know what else wasn't the end of the world? That Johnny Manziel rolling up the dollar bill in a Vegas bathroom. It wasn't the end of the world.
It's too much money in my hand. I can't hear you. Answering or not.
Yeah, that wasn't the end of the world either. But it was after he was a little less coachable, money signs at the draft, selling pictures as a college senior, putting his team's season in jeopardy. Drip, 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 drip. It's not a tsunami, but you need a plumber. Drip, 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 drip. Jameis Winston didn't have the self-awareness to know the whole world is wondering about his immaturity. Gets drafted, boom, crab leg picture. The other thing is, in my life, I've never had one example of a smart guy with good judgment that hangs around guys with bad judgment. Never seen it. Smart guys hang around smart guys, dopes hang around dopes. You know, ethical people hang around ethical people, creeps hang around creeps. We all are drawn to ourselves. Conservatives hang out with conservatives. Libs hang with libs. It's the way it mostly works, right? We kind of hang around ourselves. They say everybody's favorite word is their own name. We hang around people that make us feel good about ourselves. One of the questions I had about Johnny Manziel last year when I said he would be a disaster. He was a frat boy who hang around every time you saw a picture. Every time you heard anything, he hung around frat boys. Jameis Winston's buddies last night, they thought the crab leg was funny. Those are his boys. Johnny Manziel last year, what did I say? Dude, he's a franchise quarterback. Play the tape again. And these are Johnny Manziel's friends. Listen to this.
I can't hear you. There's too much money in my hand. I can't hear you. Answering or
not. Franchise quarterback, $100 million? Really? Think Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck, Joe Flacco, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning hang out with those guys? Frat boys? It's not the end of the world, man. But there's a reason he took that picture off his Instagram. Come on. Have a little self-awareness, a smidge, a dabble. As Maya Angelou said, people are telling you who they are. Believe them. Heard brought to you by Regis. New way to work. Call 1-800-OFFICES. 1-800-OFFICES. So Bill Polian, Mel Kiper, R.J. Bell, Evander Holyfield, 2 hours from now will punch Vince in the arm in the, speaking of poor judgment, the most egregious action that has ever taken place on this show. The other thing we saw yesterday was a great example of this. And Bill Polian and I mostly agree on everything, but this one I've always wondered about. It's the old value-need argument. Do you take what you need? Hey, we need a left tackle. Let's take a left tackle. Or do you just go with the best player available? Most of the league believes in you just go with the best player available. But I ask you this. If your girlfriend or wife goes, go to the store, kids want breakfast, and we need milk, eggs, and cereal, and you came back and said, I didn't get any of those, but I got a rake. It was on sale. And your wife would be like, well, we have a rake. I know, but it was on sale. It was a value purchase by me. Now, we're not going to feed the children. But the value of the rake, they were almost giving it away. Well, we've got a rake. I still contend what kills you in this league, of the 2 or 3 things that kill you, are massive holes. The coaching is so good. The technology is so good. If you have a hole on a football team, Belichick's going to burrow in on that thing for 4 quarters. I mean, every time they play the Indianapolis Colts, they're like, weak defensive front. Burrow in, burrow in, burrow in. Colts can't stop the run. The New York Giants historically are one of the smartest teams in this league. They went out yesterday, and they got a player, and I'm here to tell you Eric Flowers probably isn't the 9th best player in the draft. But they have potentially a great offense. Shane Vereen, Victor Cruz, Odell Beckham, Larry Donnell, Eli Manning. They just need a left tackle. So am I supposed to say this morning that's a bad pick? They needed milk and eggs and butter, and they went and got it. They didn't get a rake. You could make an argument. A lot of guys are better. I mean, Nelson Aguilar, Philip Dorsett, wide receivers, probably more talent, Eric Flowers, but they got Victor Cruz and Odell Beckham. So it's hard for me to criticize a team, A, like the Giants that have won Super Bowls, and B, they had this big hole. They needed to fill it. Because if they don't, in this league in 2015, teams are like, bad left tackle, bring heat. And Eli Manning's not very mobile. So last night I really thought we saw an example of value and need. Carolina didn't need Shaq Thompson, but he's really good. Meanwhile, the Giants really needed a left tackle, and I'm not sure he was the 9th best player in the draft. I don't think it's cemented. I think sometimes if you got a hole, you got to fill it.
Colin Cowherd.
The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Bill Polian's joining us. Bill, I've never, ever, ever believed in trading prospects for prospects outside of the Andrew Luck or the John Elway. So San Diego goes out, and in what is a weaker draft, they have a need. They get Melvin Gordon, and in their eyes, it's a hole, and they trade picks. That's the one move I didn't love. I don't like trading prospects for prospects. What was your thought on what San Diego did to get a very good player, but they traded prospects for prospects?
No, what they did was they got a player before somebody else was going to get him. He was the last player on the board that filled that need, that had where the need line crossed the talent line, and rather than lose him and have to go for a lesser player, they moved up. Good move.
Do you believe, Bill, when it comes to value and need, explain to our audience where you stand on that?
Well, first of all, there is no such thing as value for the pick. It's all about putting together a football team. That's what the draft is about. It's not about 1 to 336. That's a misnomer. That's not the way general managers think. It's important that you put players in rounds that are commensurate with their grades, with their talent, with their numbers. That was obvious last night in the first round, with the exception of Shelton everybody had sterling numbers in the first round, commonly called PQs, physical qualities, the measurables, height, weight, speed. And by the way, the boards are constructed not in a linear fashion, not vertically. They're constructed horizontally by round. The rounds are vertical. The positions are horizontal. So if you have a defensive tackle rated as a first-round player and a running back rated as a first-round player, and there's only one running back left on the board who's a first-round player, as is the San Diego case, then go ahead and the need line crosses the talent line. Go ahead and make a move and get that guy. That's what the draft is all about, building your football team. It's not about drafting player 27 at 17. That's non-existent. That's not the way teams look at it.
People have said through the years running backs are a dime a dozen. But, Bill, couldn't I make the argument that whether it's dentists, scouts, or running backs or florists, there's very few excellent anything in life. And if you think Todd Gurley is an elite running back, then why can't you take him early? I mean, that whole dime a dozen argument, where do you fall on that?
First of all, professional football players who can win are not a dime a dozen. They're the very best in America. That's why we have a draft, because you don't want one club accumulating too many of the best players. That unbalances competition. Secondly, who said you can't draft running backs in the first round? Tell that to Anthony Dickerson. Tell it to Edgerrin James. Tell it to Marshall Faulk. Come on. That's a fallacy as well. The bottom line is that you draft difference makers in the first round. If you can get a difference maker, you're jumping up and down for joy. God only made so many difference makers. So the fact that he happens to be a running back who touches the ball a lot during the game and who scores touchdowns, why wouldn't you draft him? That's, again, back to value for the pick. There is no such thing as value for the pick. It's a question of how you build your football team. It's not about where they rank on someone's imaginary board. That's not how it's done. And I know Mel Kiper doesn't feel that way, and I respect him, and he's a great guy, and he has a tough job because he ranks in 336, 1 to 336, or however many there are. I couldn't do that, but that's not the way teams think. So Gurley, absent the physical issue, and every team's doctor has to decide that and give the team the prognosis, assuming that the prognosis is good. Gurley was a top 10 player. There's no question about it. He was a difference maker.
Oh, yeah.
And why not take it?
Here's an interesting one. I've read some criticism of the Colts taking Philip Dorsett, the wide receiver, but I'm going to throw something at you. Number one, if you're the Colts, you really believe that Andrew Luck is going to get you to that AFC championship 5-6 more times in 10 years. New England just lost both their elite corners. Do you think they even thought about that and thought, hey, Revis, Brown are gone. We're already good at wide receiver. This kid is a complete playmaker. Do you think they even in the back of their mind thought about New England's corners departure and that pick?
No, I don't think so. I think first of all, they're making a run at it next year. The veterans they added speak to that. He's a little guy, but he's a dynamic player. There's a history with Indianapolis of playing with little guys. Now he's far smaller than what we played with, but he is a dynamic player, and he gives them immediately a return presence that they have sadly lacked. So I think that's where they were looking.
Was there any first-round pick you didn't love based on the tape you'd looked at?
Yeah, I think Perryman, didn't catch the ball. Everybody has a hole in them. I think, let me add this. Everybody picks everybody apart in the first round. And having done this for a long, long time, with my livelihood on the line, I get it. I understand, and was one of the people who would always probe at weaknesses. Can we live with this weakness? If this guy is going to fail, why is he going to fail? Now, that's not the most positive way to go about it, but but you are doing it for your living, and especially in the early rounds, it's very important to make sure that you don't fail. So there were some players like Armstead who I thought had some motor problems or consistency problems, is probably a better way to put it. All the PQs, all the talent, all the potential. Perryman didn't catch the ball as well as I would have liked. But, if a team believes that they can coach that out of him and overcome it, then everything else with those guys was a number one. So, I mean, I don't want to nitpick. It's just that, when you do it for a living, you do nitpick because you want to try and make the absolute best possible pick you can make. If you ask me, did everybody do well in the first round? The old joke is everybody's undefeated on draft day. I didn't see anybody picked who I didn't think really belonged there. So, again, I think that speaks to the fact that there were 2 extra weeks. It's now the norm that there are 2 extra weeks than there used to be. Information flies around. People become risk averse the more information they get, and that's just kind of the way it worked out. One friend in the league said to me on Wednesday night, the boards are gonna go exactly as they were after the combine, and he was 100% right.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
The Herd on ESPN Radio. Cashman Field, AAA baseball stadium, my first job out of college. Spent about 13, 14, 15 hours a day there. At the time, it was the AAA affiliate for the Las Vegas Stars. And that's Mandalay Bay, where we are doing our show today, yesterday, day before. The only draft pick in the first round that I questioned, and again, I said this to start the show, you got to be careful about making big judgments. You don't know. For instance, a lot of people were critical of Philip Dorsett, the receiver, to Indianapolis because they already have a great receiving core. But couldn't I argue this? In a draft with very few elite talent, I know if I give a good receiver to Andrew Luck, he'll make him very good. I mean, would Jordy Nelson be that good with Jay Cutler? Because he's spectacular with Aaron Rodgers. Would Julian Edelman be that good with Sam Bradford? Because he's great with Tom Brady. Philip Dorsett's a really good player. With Andrew Luck, couldn't I argue he could be great? So if you go into a draft and you're not really sure if there's a lot of players by the time you're picking and Indy's picking late, you're like, well, we know if we give him to Andrew Luck and he's like a 6, Andrew will make him an 8. You know, it's like I thought about that with Leonard Williams going to the Jets. There's some questions about Leonard Williams that he comes off high off the snap. But the Jets' defensive line is so talented. In a draft where you don't think there's a lot of great players, you'll never be able to focus in on Leonard Williams. He's going to walk into a team with so many good players around him, he'll get one-on-one blocking or rushing opportunities. Never be able to double-team him. In college, everybody double-teamed him. And that's the funny thing about Leonard Williams. In college, he got doubles. In the NFL with the Jets, he'll never get doubled. So the Jets say to themselves, in a draft we don't love, it's not a position of need, but he's really good. And the truth is, even an average defensive lineman with this group could flourish. And I think sometimes, I look at that Philip Dorsett pick, and Bob Kravitz this morning is like, I hate it. It's not a position we need. But every single person they put around Andrew Luck ends up being better than you thought they would be. I get it. I didn't love Todd Gurley to the Rams, but again, if you're saying to yourself, Jeff Fisher, we think he's the third best player in the draft, and we got the 10th pick. I know we drafted Trey Mason. I know our offensive line stinks, which it does. I know we need help in other spots, but we don't love this draft. We have him as the fourth best player. We're going to take him. And for the record, is it outrageous to think that Todd Gurley could be a 100-yard-a-game performer on average? Well, if you average 400 yards of offense on Sunday and you just picked up a guy that averages a quarter of that, is it a terrible pick? You have to be very careful about this stuff. I don't think anybody whiffed. John Gruden, by the way, loved. A lot of critics didn't. I'm reading the critics this morning. They didn't like Gurley to the Rams. Here's John Gruden. He loved it.
Well, you got to admit, Jeff Fisher, when he's been at his best, they've had a good defense, and they have been able to run the football. Think about the head coach, the identity of a Jeff Fisher football team. Run the football, play good defense. That'll help Nick Foles. That'll help this offensive line. I love this pick. You can feature him every Sunday.
You know, another running back that got taken, Melvin Gordon with San Diego. I don't like trading picks for picks. I don't like doing that. Because that's kind of, I've always had one or two theories on this draft, and outside of one or two players ever, I don't want to give up prospects to get a prospect. But Melvin Gordon has zero bust potential. There's no chance he's a bust. He may not be great. He won't be a bust. If you feel there's 8 guys in this first round and you're San Diego that could bust, why not take him? The other thing about value systems, let's be honest, doesn't environment change your value system a little? Honestly, you ever seen that show, Naked and Afraid? Ever seen that show, Naked and Afraid? Like day 1, the guy's like, hey, man, I'm a food snob. Day 4, he's like, snake, it's a little tinny, but there's worse things to eat. You watch all those shows, and you watch people's food standards drop the longer they're out in the jungle. And like day 2, bear poop is atrocious. Day 7, it's foie gras. You're like, this thing's a delicacy in some countries. It's a little earthy, but you sit around this draft and you're like, there's guys in this first round that weren't even productive in college. And you look at Melvin Gordon and you're like, there were games he ran for 400 yards. So, you go into a draft, running backs are a dime a dozen. We don't like to trade picks. You get middle to end of this draft and you see Melvin Gordon sitting there, and I'll tell you, Melvin Gordon, there is no chance he's a bust. None. Zero chance he's a bust. You can't say that about a lot of guys in this first round.
Colin Cowherd. Looking good. Well, looking okay.
The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Leave the TV production to us. It's sort of what we do, and we're good at it. Last year, it got a 7. Last night, it got over a 5. You want to know what the NBA playoff series are getting? 1s. Want to know what the hockey games are getting? 0.6s. Last year, the draft got a 7. It's what the public likes. We're in the consumer business. We kind of know what we're doing with TV production. Maybe you've noticed. Doesn't mean we're always right. The draft is easily the biggest story in sports until tomorrow night at about 9 o'clock. 9 Pacific, midnight East Coast, when Pacquiao and Mayweather take over. And it's the second day, third day, actually, of the draft. The draft is significantly bigger than any basketball or hockey game being played in the next 2 weeks. Now, when you get to the conference finals, it can be different. But you're talking a bad first round of the NBA playoffs. Outside of the Spurs-Clippers, which has been great, and they will go to a Game 7. And I got to tell you, listen, the Clippers have more talent. They've got 2 stars in their prime, Blake Griffin, Chris Paul. But I still think San Antonio wins Game 7. Here's Popovich after last night. He was not in the greatest of moods after having a chance to close out the series and failing. Here's Greg Popovich last night.
No excuse for it. Just poor. We should be embarrassed at the way we came out for a closeout game in every regard.
Yeah, it was bad. I'll still take the Spurs in Game 7. Okay. So I just complimented ESPN. But let me be critical of my own company. And not anybody individually, because there's like 4 and 5 and 6 and 8 and 7 people. And maybe I missed this. But my 2 takeaways on Roger Goodell yesterday. Number 1 is, I think in the first hour, you had to mention how much he was getting booed. You have to mention that. If I was on the draft coverage, I would say, this guy's sort of getting booed. I mean, he's not very popular. Now, all commissioners get booed. That's just the way it works, like umpires. It's just tradition, but it's pretty obvious Goodell's Q rating is really low. I think you have to acknowledge that. Nobody talked about it. Elephant in the room. Come on. You got to mention that. The second thing where I think Twitter makes a mountain out of a molehill, and this is just people, let's be honest about Twitter. Really busy people are not on it much. A lot of times it's just people that need to get a life. Roger Goodell came out and he butchered Marcus Mariota's name. He's the quarterback for Oregon. Play the tape.
With the second pick in the 2015 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Marcus Mariota, quarterback, Oregon.
Okay, that's not exactly his name. A, who cares? He's sort of a busy guy. B, nobody gets their name butchered more than Hawaiian football players, okay? In the history of football. Al Michaels, you could talk to anybody that's ever worked in Hawaii as a play-by-play guy. Who cares? Years ago, I got an email, when people used to really use email, we didn't have Twitter, and I got it from a guy, and it was the worst spelling I'd ever seen. He was a very successful guy. The grammar was fine. The spelling was atrocious. I think he's the second richest guy I've ever known. He's really busy. He doesn't care. Ernest Hemingway acknowledged bad speller. Winston Churchill, bad speller. Somebody once said to Ernest Hemingway, this is a true story, he couldn't spell loving or moving. He'd add an E. And when he would turn in his manuscripts, they'd say, why do you add an E to loving and an E to moving? And he'd say, that's why we hired you as an editor. I don't worry about spelling. I worry about ideas and a narrative. By the way, F. Scott Fitzgerald, the great Gatsby, hundreds of spelling mistakes. Who gives a rip if a commissioner butchers a Hawaiian football player's name? I butchered it. It doesn't matter. He's busy. He's got 1 million calls a day. Twitter, get a life.
Marcus Mariota.
Who cares? Non-issue. Marcus has had that thing butchered probably by family members. God.
Marcus Mariota.
I literally took over Twitter. I'm like, because on the draft is one of those events I like following on Twitter. I follow all my reporter guys. I follow all the NFL guys. I got every NFL guy, every NFL reporter. I got Joe Klatt. I got Peter King. I got you guys, our guy. I follow everybody. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's not like Marcus went, who was that? Did I get picked?
Marcus Mariota.
Whoa, is that a safety for Utah? What? God. It's just God. It's just sometimes it's just. Eric, you're in the herd on ESPN Radio. Eric, go ahead.
Hey, Colin. Thanks for having me on.
You bet.
Hey, just want to challenge just a little bit of what you're saying about Roger Goodell. Yes, you're absolutely right. He's a very extremely busy guy, probably in the upper echelon of wealth people in the world. But at the NFL draft, Marcus Mariota's name is printed on the card, so there shouldn't be a spelling issue. And moreover, Eric,
there wasn't a spelling issue. He's Hawaiian. There was a pronunciation issue. I've butchered it. I'm a talk show host, one of the more popular ones in the country. I've butchered it.
Right, Colin. And my point is that the NFL has a public relation team. He probably has enough personal assistants that can help you with pronunciation before you go live.
No, Eric, I have right now 16 people helping me on this show.
You need the help, and I know that, and that's what I'm saying. Is that
and by the way, I still butcher names, and people still listen, and nobody cares. It's the nitpickiness of nobody cares. I've got 4 producers, 6 audio, camera guys, security people, PR people. I've literally got everything shy of a makeup assistant, and I could get one if I needed one. Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter.
Marcus Mariotto.
It's not like Marcus is sitting there in Hawaii, and it's like, I think they're talking about the defensive end from Rutgers. It's not me. Well, he's got a lot of help. You know why? He's really busy. Eric, you're not. You called a sports radio show. Jeez, people. God, get a life. Here comes the Twitter police. That's why I don't stay on Twitter all day. Who gives a rip? Mel Kiper's coming up. I thought Louis Riddick was really good last night. He has his own thoughts and his own opinions. Own thoughts, own opinions. I don't think, I said this, the crab leg Instagram picture by Jameis Winston, it's not the be-all, end-all. It really isn't. It's not the be-all, end-all. But it is drip, 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 drip. After a while, it's like, I got to get the faucet fixed. Drip, 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 drip. Just another example of come on, know better. Everybody in the world knows you're trying to get past those stupid stories. Why extend the story? Just be smarter than that. It's not the end of the world, but like Johnny Manziel, drip, 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 drip. It's another example of immaturity.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
Major League Baseball.
San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
The new college football playoff.
College football playoff national champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Your home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
NFL draft last night. I didn't think it was the most exciting draft. I thought we would see more movement and more trades. We did not, so I was wrong on that. Mel Kiper Jr. joins us. He'll be in Chicago again today and tonight and tomorrow. All right, Mel, was it the most exciting draft? What was the biggest surprise for you last night in round one?
I think Shaq Thompson, the outside linebacker, safety, running back, whatever you want to do with Shaq Thompson, the Carolina at 25. He was 52 on the board. I don't know how he's going to fit into their defense as an outside linebacker. We'll see, but I thought that was a little high for Carolina. Stephon Anthony, inside linebacker, three bunched together to take him at the end of the first and passed on some pretty good receivers to do that. Andrew Speed a little early at 13, and I'm with you, Colin. I thought there would be a trade or two. I was completely wrong. I thought there would be a couple trades in the top 10. There wasn't anything until 15 when MG3 went to San Diego. So very, I'd say, lackluster in terms of no trades. But, again, Leonard Williams to the Jets. Surprised that he fell that far, but especially to the Jets who would take him at that point. If he fell, I thought it might be a trade there. Nothing. So, yeah, I think the lack of activity definitely, I think, surprised a lot of people.
Now, you historically have not been a fan of running backs, and I'm gonna go back and forth on this. As you know, I'm kind of a recruiting dork, and I've noticed something over the last 7 or 8 years in recruiting high school players to college, and that is even in the state of California, there is maybe 2 top running backs and a dozen high-end Division I receivers. And the theory has always been running backs are a dime a dozen. Can I make the argument that kids start trends and know trends more than you and I do in our 50s, and that over the last 10 years, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids who are running backs are transitioning to quarterback and wide receiver, and there are now, Mel, rarely elite running backs out there, and they're gaining in value because there's about 2 great ones at draft, and that we should change our thinking on running backs.
I wouldn't, because I think you can always find them. And the problem is a lot of these teams have 2, 3 running backs in the NFL. Very few teams really desperately need a running back. I mean, look what Justin Forsett did in Baltimore. I mean, he was a guy's journeyman, cast off. Nobody thought he could, and he ends up having a great year. And my attitude is the line dictates DeMarco Murray rushing for as many yards as he did. And certainly I think that's the whole key to any running back is, are you going to get the support from your offensive line? I think if you look at the injury factor with Gurley, same thing you think about with other backs that have gone 2nd or 3rd round. If they're a little nick coming in, and Gurley is, that's a little risk at 10. You think about a guy, like MG3, good football player, no question, but he's got to still continue to work on his receiving out of the backfield. He's had a fumbling issue. So my attitude is still, whether it's Adrian Peterson, whoever it may be, I'm waiting until the 2nd to the 7th round to get that running back. That's just my opinion. Now, like I said last night, if you've got a coach banging on the table to take a running back, and they're rated like these two were, pretty high on my board, then I'll say, hey, go ahead and take them.
Last year we had a lot of good receivers. This year we have a lot of similar receivers in Nelson Aguilar, Amari Cooper, and Kevin White. Philadelphia, people tend to draft what they know. Once again, Chip Kelly goes to the Pac-12. Pete Carroll has gone after a lot of guys in Seattle that he recruited at USC. Did Aguilar, the receiver for the Trojans, go a little higher than you thought to Chip Kelly and the Eagles?
No, I had him actually going 18 Kansas City, 19 Cleveland, and the projection I had 16 to Houston, and one projection I did. So I thought that 16 to 19 range, he gets to 20, and he's a heck of a pick. I mean, he's got the return skills, as you know. Colin, you could give a scouting report on Nelson Aguilar. You know him better than anybody. So, I thought he could have gone right in that general vicinity. It was not a reach. It was not a stretch to say we're going to get a Pac-12 player that he's familiar with. He went right where he should. Now, are they going to draft the defensive back, the safety at some point? You still have 2nd through 7th round to go. So
that's right.
People always look at the first round and say, well, why didn't they take this? Why didn't they take that? There's a long way to go. You can't let the need chart dictate your first-round pick. Ted Thompson said that in Green Bay all along. We're not going to be driven by need. We're taking the best players, and that's what a lot of teams tend to do. And most of these teams have 3, 4, 5 need areas anyway, so you would hope that the guy you pick is at least at one of those 4 or 5 positions.
And I'll throw something else at you, Mel. I think the technology's greater, obviously, in the NFL. The scouting's better and the coaching's better. And if you do have a weakness, teams more than ever can seize it. I don't know if Eric Flowers for the Giants is the 9th best player. But couldn't I make the argument if I'm the New York Giants? We've got tremendous receivers. We add Shane Vereen. Eli had a good year. We're just a left tackle away from being really profound on offense. Couldn't I argue it's just too big a hole? We don't think Flowers is a top 10 player, but we gotta plug that spot.
Yeah, that's I think it sounds good based on the ability that he has. He's got tremendous physical ability. He's huge, he's strong, he's athletic, he's got that nasty streak, but I don't think he's a left tackle right now. I think technically he's so raw, and defensive ends on that side are going to eat him up. But right now, I think right tackle, maybe guard, but until he learns and is coached up, he's not ready. Now, can he be in 3 years, 2 years, a heck of a bookend? I think he can. Is 9 too high for my ratings for it was? But, hey, again, as you always say, hey, if the kid can play, you take him at 25, you take him at 9, does it really matter? And this kid athletically is top of the line. He just, I think, needed more time, more seasoning, more coaching. And he'll get that with the Giants. He'll get that in the NFL. And then the sky's the limit. If you can tweak technically what he's doing wrong, then you got yourself a heck of a right tackle, maybe a left tackle. But I think people say guard. I think he could be a heck of a right tackle. I'm a little hesitant to say he could be a great left tackle.
Leonard Williams drops to 6. Why do you think that is?
Couple things. Just the fact that Jacksonville had a decision to make. Do you take Fowler or do you take Williams? Okay. Oakland had a decision to make. Do you take Williams or Cooper? They went with Cooper. Washington had all those additions that they made. They weren't looking at Williams. They had all those defensive line additions in free agency. And there he is for the Jets. And plus he had the durability concern with the injuries. But just the fact that, hey, we're looking at one or the other, and the other team, they went with Fowler instead of Williams. They went with Cooper instead of Williams. You can't argue with that. All those players were bunched together. I had Williams 1, Cooper 2, Fowler 3. So the guys I had at 2 and 3, they took over number 1. You're splitting hairs there, Colin. And because of that, and the other team's not needing him at all, it'll let him go to the Jets, who really on paper don't need him. But if there's an issue with Muhammad Wilkerson, you're trying to trade him, whatever, or you're going to change your front, let him be a 3 technique, whatever they have in mind, Todd Bowles does, you're getting yourself, if you can keep him healthy, you're getting yourselves one heck of a player.
Mel Kiper, America. Good talking to you, buddy.
You got it, Colin. Have fun out there, pal.
For over 60 years. Oh, coming up next. Oh, one part of the country isn't going to like this very much. Deal with it. Taking a shot at one part of the country.
Technology gone bad. Gone bad. This is the Thundering Herd podcast.
I really couldn't complain about anything the first 9 teams did. St. Louis with Todd Gurley at 10, didn't love. But let's take Tampa at number 1. Well, they were 30th in the league last year in offense. They needed help. Tennessee was number 2. It's a quarterback league, and Mariota's got a ton of potential. Jacksonville was number 3. They needed an edge rusher. And going into the draft, that was a number 1 priority. Oakland was the only team in the league not to have a 700-yard receiver last year. They went and got Amari Cooper. The Redskins wanted more toughness in front of RG3. They don't feel he's a pure pocket passer. They want a road grader. They want to run the ball. They got an offensive lineman. The Jets are in a division with Tom Brady. They took a very athletic defensive lineman. The Chicago Bears lost Brandon Marshall. They got Kevin White. The Atlanta Falcons literally make every quarterback in the league comfortable. They went and got Vic Beasley to make opposing quarterbacks less comfortable. He's an edge rusher. And at number 9, the Giants, they're rebuilding their offensive line. The first 9 picks, you can nitpick. Well, the Jets didn't really need. Listen, if you were watching that draft, like I was watching that draft, didn't you say to yourself, Leonard Williams is still available? I've watched Leonard Williams play every game of his college career. My concern, he did have nagging injuries. What I saw, wildly athletic for a 310-pound guy. Nelson Aguilar. Chip Kelly again goes to the Pac-12. He's faster than Robert Woods from USC, who's been good in Buffalo. I think he's more disciplined and has worked harder on his game than Marquise Lee in Jacksonville. I think he's the best of both. He is incredibly long. I think he's more disciplined than Marquise Lee, and I think he's more athletic than Robert Woods. Bill Polian was on earlier. We got into a discussion about this dime a dozen talk, and I think it's kind of overplayed. I just don't think really good people in any business are a dime a dozen. And Bill Polian came on the show, it's the second bite, John, and said he doesn't buy into that talk either.
Professional football players who can win are not a dime a dozen. They're the very best in America. That's why we have a draft, because you don't want one club accumulating too many of the best players. That unbalances competition.
He also said, don't buy into this value pick thing. There's no such thing as value for a pick.
There is no such thing as value for the pick. It's all about putting together a football team. That's what the draft is about. It's not about 1 to 336. That's a misnomer. That's not the way general managers think.
Now, I didn't love what the Saints did. They went and got a left tackle, and they already have a young left tackle, Taron Armstead, they like. I didn't like the Rams getting Gurley. I don't love it. They got Trey Mason. They got to rebuild that offensive line. It's garbage. And, yes, I did notice that cannabis is legal in Denver, and the Broncos picked Shane Ray. Yeah, I noticed. That was the most overused joke on Twitter last night. And I also find myself trusting people. I'll give you an example. Like if you've been really smart and successful for years, I just sort of give you the benefit of the doubt. Like Brashad Perriman, that wide receiver Baltimore took, can't catch the football. But Baltimore has been so good in the draft. If Cleveland takes him, I'm like, bad pick. Baltimore takes him, I'm like, it'll probably work out. So I tend to be one of those guys where I kind of, who's making the pick? Pete Carroll has been really good round 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. The Seahawks' next 2 or 3 picks, they didn't have a first rounder, I'll trust them. You know, New England, outside of wide receiver, usually nails their first-round pick, almost always. Chad Jackson was a whiff years ago from Florida. But basically New England always nails their number one pick. The other story, which is obviously why I'm here. They didn't let me just go to Vegas to hang out. There is a fight tomorrow night. Manny Pacquiao, who's got 5 losses, and his last 2 big fights, he lost one by decision and was knocked out in another. He is the underdog, although the betting favorite for the public. Teddy Atlas, a former trainer, came on our show earlier this week. And he said what's noticeable to him about this fight is that Manny Pacquiao, just when you look at him, doesn't look the same as 5 or 6 years ago.
He's not physically the same guy anymore. Now, at that time, we know that Mayweather was saying that he didn't want to fight him because he thought it was on PEDs and he wanted him to take Olympic-style blood testing, and he refused to take it. I had no idea if that's why. All I know is that my eye test, my common sense test, shows me that he's a smaller guy, and he's not as destructive.
That you can't argue. It's been years since Pacquiao's last knockout of a legitimate fighter. Atlas, though he may find him reprehensible at times, says Mayweather is an odd paradox as a person and a fighter.
Outside the ring, he takes a lot of risks. You know, he lives a life that is sometimes a little bit out of control. And inside the ring, he takes no risks. He's always in control. That's his haven. And he's very conservative. Now, you could say that the change in him from 6 years ago or 5 years ago is that in his last fight, in his rematch with Madonna, in that fight, he was more conservative than ever. 38 years old, all the money in the bank, ready to go off to the sunset. It happens to people.
Yeah, I don't think either of these guys are in their prime. But I think Mayweather's closer to his prime, so I'll take him. And whenever I make a prediction, 2 things I always think about. Health. That's why I like the Patriots over the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. They were just healthier. And how close are you to your prime? Mayweather's not in his prime. He's probably 2 fights removed from it. I think Pacquiao's probably 10 fights removed from it. So I'm going to take Mayweather. I am interested to see who the public at the MGM Grand roots for. I have a feeling the crowd is going to be overwhelmingly Pacquiao. 80-20 Pacquiao. Because remember, you'd say, well, Mayweather's from Vegas. Not a lot of people in Vegas are getting tickets. In fact, not a lot of the public is getting tickets. I saw a number, I think on Monday or Tuesday, and only 15% of the tickets, 15%, were available to just regular Joes. 500 of almost 17,000. So, a lot of suits, a lot of rich guys, a lot of corporate, interesting. I'll be interested. If it was the public, they'd be all for Pacquiao. I'm interested to see the crowd reaction. I almost feel like a lot of the crowd's going, are they going for either fighter, or are they just going for the event because it feels like the last big fight in the history of the country? I think some people are going for almost a historic reason. I was at the last big title fight in America, and I don't think that's an embellishment. I think we're running out of them. I think we're running out of fights that we care about. This could be the last one.
Check out The Herd with Colin Cowherd weekdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNradio.com, and on ESPNU. The Thundering Herd Podcast. Two of baseball's best go head-to-head in interleague action when the Tigers head to St. Louis to face the Cardinals. That one is gone. The pregame at 7 Eastern, first pitch at 8, Sunday on ESPN and ESPN Radio.